They called it chaos. But today, 72.7% of a wounded land now breathes with purpose again. They said he was dangerous, but Captain Ibrahim Traore did not surrender. He stood, and the nation stood with him. In villages once erased from memory, laughter echoes from classrooms once lost to ash. In towns long gripped by fear, markets bloom like dawn, breaking through silence. And in the heart of the Sahel, the flag of Burkina Faso rises not above fear, but in place of it. But switch on the news and it is as if none of it ever happened. No headlines, no data, no dignity, just the recycled verdict: Burkina Faso is falling apart. So ask yourself, if 72.7% of a nation returns to its people, how can that be failure? And more importantly, who gains when Africa's light is dimmed? Stay with us, because this is not merely a battle over land. It is a battle over narrative, and who has the courage to speak it aloud? If this truth moves, you hit the like button not just for us, but for every silenced victory across Africa. There were places they had written off as gone forever, villages ghosted from maps, bridges sunken into memory, fields where no birds sang, roads swallowed whole by fear. Western analysts called them irrecoverable. Foreign correspondents shrugged and said, not without NATO, not without billions. But they misunderstood African soil. It does not only grow cassava and millet, it grows memory, it grows loyalty, it grows a people who refuse to vanish in silence. When the soldiers of Burkina Faso advanced, they did not arrive on chariots of foreign steel. They came barefoot, dust-covered, sunburnt, but with eyes like fire. Some held rifles, but many held nothing but the memory of a cousin crushed beneath a collapsed wall, or the silence of a mother who never stopped waiting. They carried shovels, picks, sometimes just their hands. They dug through land laced with fear and minefields. They cleared paths that had not seen light in years. They slept beside homes that had forgotten the sound of safety. They did not wait for help. They became help. In Diapaga, a man whose voice had withered with grief whispered, "I thought no one would ever come." In Gamu, a woman kneeled and kissed the dirt, not because it was clean, but because it remembered her name. And in Kaya, a teacher walked through the ruins of a school lost to flame 4 years ago and saw a child still sitting still, waiting under the acacia tree. This was not a military maneuver. It was a resurrection. Every inch retaken was more than soil. It was a heartbeat, a resurrection of what they tried to erase: our right to exist in peace. But don't look for this on your evening news. No camera crew caught the moment when a drumbeat returned to the valley. No breaking headline said hope is back in Burkina Faso, because that is not the story they want. They crave collapse. They chase crisis. They wait for corpses and captions soaked in pity. But what happens when Africans build without blueprint? When we rise without foreign hands pushing us? When we win without their weapons? In the territories reclaimed by courage, something sacred has taken root. Children laugh without flinching. Markets buzz with the scent of maize and pepper, not smoke. Cattle roam free. Drums dance in the dusk again. Yes, the scars remain. Yes, the threat still lurks. But the land breathes. There is rhythm again. A pulse. A low rising hum of hope. A soldier whispered, "We sowed seeds where others planted despair." Another smiled, and now they bloom. This is how victory arrives in Africa. Not with fireworks or fanfare, but with a child stepping through the gates of a school. A grandmother sweeping the ashes from a home she never thought she'd see again. A village breaking bread where flames once ruled. Let them stay silent. Let their cameras turn away. Let their headlines scroll past us. We do not need their witness to prove we are real. We are already here. And if something in you stirs, if you feel the pull of a grandmother's hymn or the scent of land your ancestors touched, then comment amen. Let that be your voice in this chorus. Let it echo that you see what the world refuses to. Because this is not only about land, it is about belonging. And belonging is what they never imagined we would reclaim. Yet here we are. Look again. That mother in Suru holding her son's hand, walking through a once dead field. There are no more mines, only wildflowers. The boy asks, "What happened here?" She answers, "We came back." But she does not just mean soldiers. She means a people, a spirit, a promise. Because to reclaim the ground is only the beginning. Now we reclaim the soul. And that, my friend, is where we are going next. What does it truly mean to return to stand where your brother fell and not fall yourself? To enter a home that once screamed with bullets and quietly sweep its floor? To hear a child's laughter in a place where silence once grieved like a funeral hymn? In Burkina Faso, people are not merely going back to villages. They are journeying back to memory, to identity, to the soft but powerful whisper of who they were before war tried to rewrite them. There is an old teacher on the edges of Djibo. Her name is Maman Salimata. She taught literature for 31 years. When the terrorists came, they burned down her school. They called learning a poison. They ripped pages from her favorite novel and forced her to watch the fire eat each word. She ran. She hid. But even in hiding, she whispered poetry into the wind, as if planting verses in the dust. Now, after 5 long years, she stands at the threshold of a rebuilt classroom. The blackboard is new. The desks carry age. But her voice does not tremble. She begins her lesson with the same lines she once recited beneath mango trees before the war we write, so the world does not forget we were here. Then there is little Ahmed. He was 6 the last time he touched a pencil. Now he is 11, and his hand quivers as he spells out his name for the first time again. Not because he forgot, but because part of him feared he would never be allowed to remember. He pauses, looks up at the teacher, and asks, "Can I write it bigger?" The teacher nods. And in that moment, Ahmed smiles because his name is not just a name. It is a declaration, I am still here. In the village of Pama, a woman named Adama walks past the ruins of her old house. Her son died there. A bomb, they said. Wrong place, wrong time. But she says there is no such thing. Only wrong people deciding whose grief counts. She does not rebuild the home. Not yet. Instead, she plants flowers along the broken threshold. Yellow. Untamed. She says, if my son cannot step out that door again, then let the blossoms carry his footsteps. This is what return means here. Not the polished images of ribbon cuttings and stage smiles, but real return where scars are not hidden but held, where pain is not denied but sung, where dignity does not arrive on the back of foreign aid but rises from soil sweat in the stubborn act of surviving. You do not rebuild a nation with concrete alone. You need memory. You need mercy. You need people who remember the silence and still dare to sing when it lifts. The Western media calls it a return to normal. But the people of Burkina Faso are not chasing normal. They are reaching for something deeper, the right to breathe without begging, to tuck your child in without flinching at night sounds, to grow old and be left in peace, to pass with dignity, not violence. That is not normal. That is sacred. And so they return, one by one, village by village, in prayer, in song, in silence, and in rebuilding. Not just homes, but hearts. If you are watching this from Detroit or Dakar, Nairobi, or New Orleans, tell us where you are from in the comments. Let us draw a map not of borders, but of belonging. Let the world know we were never gone. We were gathering strength, because in every country and every home where this story is heard and remembered, we are returning too. In Culpelago, a boy picked up a pencil today. He sat in a classroom once choked by ash and ghosts. The wind pushed through the window and he wrote his sister's name. She never got the chance to learn, but he will. The teacher passed by, resting a hand on his shoulder. No words, just presence. The kind of presence that does not need translation. The kind that says, you matter. The kind that whispers, we are back. And outside that classroom, no longer just 4 walls, but a promise reborn, the flag of Burkina Faso rose into the sun. No headlines, no envoys, no trending hashtags, but there were children and laughter. And the undeniable truth, the war for a nation's soul is not being won on battlefields. It is being won in chalk lines, in whispered names, in healing hands. Yet even as these children reclaim their names somewhere in a distant office, behind polished desks, another version of the story is being drafted. One that omits them, one that questions their right to return. And if we do not speak now, that lie may be the only story the world remembers. Not every war echoes with gunfire. Some unfold in whispers and headlines twisted in silences bought. And some in the stories that were never told because they did not serve the script. For every village reclaimed in Burkina Faso, there is another front line invisible, but just as fierce. A battle for the truth. Because while the people rebuild roofs, reopen classrooms, and bury their dead with dignity, others, far from the dust and danger, rewrite our reality. The Western press rarely lies with noise. They lie with neglect. When the streets bleed, the cameras flock. But when the streets heal, they vanish. They called Burkina Faso a failing state. They warned of escalating extremism. They showed satellite images when roofs were reduced to ash. But now that those same places echo with chalkboard lessons and singing children, where are the images? Where are the headlines? When Human Rights Watch published its claim that 223 civilians were killed by Burkina Faso forces, the world snapped to attention. The United States and United Kingdom issued statements within days. The story caught fire, and before the dust settled, the world had judged. But when UNICEF confirmed dozens of schools had reopened, schools once swallowed by fear, there were no live reports, no political praise, no front pages, just silence. Why is that? Because crisis is marketable, but African recovery that unsettles power. When we fall, it justifies aid. But when we rise, it questions who has been standing on our backs. A mother in Zorgo said it plainly, "We do not want pity, we want to be heard." But still the world plugs its ears, preferring to echo itself rather than listen to us. When Voice of America was suspended in Burkina Faso, critics cried censorship. But maybe the real silence was already in place long before the signal cut. Because when someone sitting in Paris reports on life in Dori or Kaya without ever having set foot there, who is their story really for? When your tragedy becomes someone else's headline, you start to wonder if they ever wanted your healing. Words can wound. Ink can injure. And silence. Silence can erase entire nations from memory. While the West debates whether Ibrahim Traore is a liberator or a tyrant, the people are simply trying to live, to go to school, to open their shops, to tuck their children in at night without flinching. But instead of classrooms, they show conflict. Instead of renewal, they show rubble. Instead of interviewing the people, they speak over them as if we are background noise in our own story. This is not journalism. This is narrative warfare. And it is lethal. Because if you control the narrative, you control who deserves compassion. If you twist the narrative, you twist the flow of aid. And if you erase the narrative, you erase the people. But we will not vanish, not under a pen, not under omission, not under the hand of a stranger paid to shape our voice into something we never said. If you have ever asked why some nations are only shown in collapse, ask who profits from keeping them broken. If this resonates, if you're tired of watching Africa through a lens smeared with assumptions, share this video. Not for likes, not for metrics, but for memory. Because memory needs defenders. And in a world where disinformation moves faster than fact, truth becomes an act of resistance. Right now in Ouagadougou, a man scrolls through a newsfeed. The headline screams instability. But outside his window, his daughter studies under a working lamp. He hears her humming as she reads aloud. He sees peace where the world insists on panic. He sees progress where the media still draws lines in the sand. He closes the article and smiles. Because the truest story is the one he can see, the one he lives. But even lived truth can be buried unless we speak, unless we all speak. Because survival on the battlefield is not enough. We must also survive the stories told about us. And then we must write our own. Sometimes it starts with a whisper, a child scratching a pencil across clean paper, a name written boldly for the first time, and from there it grows. Because the next chapter of this story will not be authored in London or Paris. It will be written in Bobo Dioulasso, in Djibo and Kaya, by our children in our tongue under our sky. The land was never truly alone, even when the headlines faded, even when the maps painted it in ash gray. Even when the world looked away, its heartbeat echoed in places no satellite could reach. Because across oceans and continents, in cramped apartments, above grocery stores in Rome, in factory barracks in Doha, in braiding salons in Manchester, and in Friday prayers under the Nairobi sun, the sons and daughters of Burkina Faso remembered. They remembered the scent of rain hitting red earth, the lullabies their mothers sang while pounding millet, the silence that followed loss, and the fire that roared back from that silence. And when the call came not through officials, nor headlines, nor embassies, but in a hush, in a shiver beneath the ribs, a knowing that the homeland was rising to its feet again. They answered. Not for politics, not for fame, but for kin, for the soil, for the soul. A nurse in Milan quietly wired half her wage. A truck driver in Abidjan skipped lunches for weeks. A family in Riyadh dropped coins into a jar that read, "For the village, for the future." They gave what they had, and often more than they could afford. Because when you are far from home, you do not forget. You ache. And that ache, if you listen, becomes sacred. It becomes motion. It becomes offering. From Qatar came over 8 million CFA francs. From Italy, 7 million. From Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda, Comoros, Tanzania, gifts not counted only in cash, but in loyalty and prayers scribbled on paper and voices breaking under distance. From Libya, 3 million. From Côte d'Ivoire, 2. From England, 1. From hands scrubbed raw in silence. From hotel backrooms and midnight shifts. From labor the world exploits, but never thanks came enough to build what bombs once tore down. These were not donations from corporations. They were acts of love from fractured hearts. And together they became bricks. They became bandages. They became light bulbs in schools and notebooks in trembling hands. Because oceans do not erase belonging, the voice of home can travel across waves. It rises in the Adan in Harlem. It whispers in bedtime songs sung in Paris. It pulses like a second heartbeat beneath every passport stamped foreign. You see, the diaspora is not a memory bank. It is a living artery. It is the breath of a nation stretched across time zones. It is the echo of ancestors learning new languages, but never forgetting their name. And when they sent money, they were not sending currency. They were sending messages to mothers who thought the world forgot them, to children still chasing dreams by candlelight, to the earth that had waited so long to be held by familiar hands. They did not give for a president. They gave for Suru, for Diapaga, for the memory of uncles who never came back, and the promise that their names would not vanish into dust. They gave without applause and without expectation. And today, on the wall of a classroom born from those offerings, a child has written in bright chalk, "Merci, je suis encore là." Thank you, I am still here. Because money alone does not make a school, but memory does. Love does. The refusal to let go, that does. If you are part of the diaspora, if your grandmother left but her prayers still called the old village by name, say it in the comments, home is not gone. Let that echo travel from the Bronx to Bobo Dioulasso. Let it ring out where once there was only silence. Because these donations are not numbers. They are names. They are voices. They are the outstretched hands of a people saying, we never stopped reaching. And while leaders may rise and fall, while borders may change and flags may fade, there is something that remains the thread between land and lineage. No matter how far it stretches, it never snaps. And when that bond awakens, it does not just rebuild homes. It rebuilds belief. That is why in a village once emptied by fear, there now stands a school. Its desks are filled. Its chalkboards are full. Its roof holds prayers that were never said aloud. It was not built by contract. It was built by covenant. A promise made in distance and honored in return. And just beyond its windows, a new wave is rising. Not from across the sea this time, but from within. Because those who once waited for miracles to arrive from elsewhere have begun to become the miracle themselves. There is something deeply unsettling about a man who does not wait for permission, especially when he is African, and especially when he is young. Ibrahim Traore did not rise to power with standing ovations from the global elite. There was no golden podium, no handshake in Paris, no white-gloved approval from think tanks in Washington. He walked straight into the storm unscripted, uninvited. And the moment he did, they scrambled to write his story for him. They called him erratic, dangerous, a populist, too bold, too raw, too young. But what they truly meant was this: he did not ask for their blessing. In a world where African leadership is often curated, arranged like furniture for comfort, not for courage, Traoré flipped the whole room. He refused to sit in chairs designed to break his back. He did not begin his presidency with diplomatic tours or state dinners. He walked through burned classrooms without cameras. He did not roll in with bulletproof convoys. He came with a pen, with questions, and with the kind of listening that governments rarely offer. He spoke to teachers and took notes. He knelt to greet children, not for optics, but out of reverence. He made no grand declarations, only promises. And then in the quiet, the rebuilding began. There is a certain power in that kind of silence. It is not empty. It is seismic. He does not shout, but his silence resounds like thunder held in a clenched fist. So when he suspended Voice of America, it was not a tantrum. It was a line drawn in dust. We will not be framed through your lens. When he told foreign troops to leave, it was not isolationism. It was clarity, a declaration that sovereignty is not gifted. It is claimed. He never once said the West was the enemy. But he made one truth very clear. Burkina Faso will not be subcontracted, not managed, not puppeteered into passivity, and that more than anything is what scared them. Because they could not choreograph him. They could not predict him. He did not owe them debt. And he did not apologize for being African fierce and fully present in his own skin. So they responded the only way power knows how when it feels out of control. They tried to redefine him, to discredit him, to cloud his image with questions no one had asked until he began to win. But the people, the ones now walking roads cleared of danger, the ones whose children read at night under lights that did not exist a year ago, they know better. Because while think tanks debated his legitimacy, he was planting seeds in classrooms and fields and hearts. He may not fit their template, but he fits the moment, and the moment has outgrown the template. He is not the kind of leader who courts power. He disrupts it. He is not here to be adored. He is here to make his people visible, to force the world to listen, and for a continent told for generations who to trust, who to follow, who to wait for, that changes everything. Because Traore is not the answer. He is the mirror. He reflects what happens when the people choose someone who looks like the struggle they survived. So yes, he is young, and yes, he is unshaken, because he comes from a generation that buried too many friends and waited too long for help that never came. He is the son of the soil, and the soil has run out of patience. If you believe Africa deserves to choose its own leaders, not inherit them from outside influence, comment. Rise. If you believe a man standing beside his people should not be feared simply because he refuses to kneel, comment. Rise. Because this was never about one man. It never is. But in him, many see a door, not to the past, but out of it. A reminder, no foreign army, no media script, no diplomatic handshake can deliver what a people must claim for themselves. He wears no crown. But in his quiet defiance, something royal has stirred in his people, not the power to rule over, but the power to no longer be ruled. Still, let us not be seduced into thinking this is enough. One man, no matter how grounded, is not a movement, not even a captain, because true freedom is not carried by one voice. It takes all of us. We were never born for silence, not when our mothers cried out through pain and named us after rivers that carved mountains and storms that refused to be still, not when our ancestors sang freedom into the wind barefoot hunted, but never broken. Not when they chained our bodies and called it commerce while we called it endurance. And we are not meant to be quiet now, because silence is what the world has always demanded of us. They taught us to smile while bleeding, to whisper about injustice, to bow in thanks for the broom handed to clean a mess we never made. But we do not owe the West our silence. We owe our children the truth that our lands were never barren, only looted, that our tongues were never broken, only buried beneath their syllables, that our people were never fragile, only forced to kneel by scripts we never wrote. They told us resistance is dangerous, but we have lived the cost of obedience. They burned our libraries and called it modernization. They redrew our borders and called it peace. They broadcast our grief and called it compassion, but never stayed long enough to understand our joy. And now as we rise, not in fury but in discipline, they tremble. Not because of our defiance, but because of our remembering. Because memory is the most radical thing we possess. And they know what happens when we remember who we were before they told us who to become. This story is not only about Burkina Faso, it is about every village erased from maps, every leader silenced by bureaucracy, every child who believed their homeland was a problem when it was always a possibility. We are not demanding vengeance. We are reclaiming clarity. To say this soil is sacred. These children are sacred. This tomorrow, though delayed, though uncertain, is ours to write, and we will not write it in whispers. So if you are watching this and your grandmother's stew held the taste of a village you have never seen, if your grandfather hummed songs no textbook ever taught, if your name was once mocked but now sounds like a drumbeat calling you home, then you are part of this. And if one day your child turns to you and asks, "What did you do when the continent was calling?" let your answer not be silence. Let it be, "I remembered, I rose, I spoke, and I did not speak alone." Because this is not a spectator story. There are no sidelines in the rebirth of a people. Only those who stood and those who chose not to. Africa does not beg to be rescued. Africa demands to be recognized. Not through fogged glass, not through the language of charity, but as a continent of breath and brilliance, a body built of memory and miracle. We do not need saving. We need space. Space to speak, to stumble and learn, to rebuild without being rebranded, to rise fully fiercely without being rewritten. And yes, we are rising. We are the teachers repainting broken chalkboards. We are the soldiers clearing paths and planting trees where landmines once claimed limbs. We are the women who stitch wounds with prayer and cloth. We are the diaspora sending not just remittances, but a relentless faith that refuses to dim. We are the voices that sing even when the microphones go dark, and we will not go quiet. If your blood carries Africa, if your breath still echoes with its rhythm, then share this story. Not for fame, not for views, but because truth needs to travel like wind. Share it like a seed passed from hand to hand. Share it like sunlight touching forgotten doorsteps. Share it like a prayer that never gave up on its people. Let the world hear what it tried to bury. Because in a schoolyard in Burkina Faso, the anthem is being sung again. The desks are filled. The walls bear scars, but they also bear color. And outside a flag waves. It does not wave with pride. It waves with memory. And though no sound may rise above the wind, the message roars not just across the red Sahel, but across hearts that once feared to hope we are back. And this time we brought our voices.